Hi, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode of Move Forward with Matt Campisi. I'm your host, Matt Campisi. On today's episode of Move Forward, we are going to talk about the family court system. The family court system. Oh, man, the family court system has screwed many people in this world. And yet, little has changed with the family court system. I want to read a post that I found online, and I think it says a lot because of the context. This is a post that was made by an attorney, and this attorney made his living representing clients in the family court. And he comes online on the internet and he posts a rant expressing his frustration with the family court system. And I'm going to read it. I've been in family law for a few years now, and I'm debating making a change. I work really hard, and I know the rules. I try to avoid court, but sometimes you just can't. But then when you make it to court, the judges just do whatever the F they feel like it. And no matter how prepared you are or how good your facts are, the judges are just going to do what they feel like. I get really down about putting work in and advising my clients to spend tens of thousands of dollars to go to court because our requests and expectations are totally in line with the family code and in line with common practice. But then it was all a waste because some judge doesn't give a shit, doesn't listen, and just does whatever they feel. It is really frustrating when you care about your client and your work. You do your best, and based on the actual law, you are right. But still your client gets a shitty outcome. It all just seems as futile. Like my only purpose is to waste people's money and cause myself stress. It's hard to admit because the highs in this job are really high, like getting a protective order or other big win for somebody who really needs and deserves the help. But the lows are awful. You just go home knowing that your client's world has been turned upside down and there is nothing you can do about it. You did everything you could for them, but all you really ended up doing was wasting a shit ton of their money. I don't know. I'm just sure there are others that got bogged down by this. If anyone has come up with a good way to cope with it, I would love to hear it. Maybe I'm just not built for it. Then he edits it. He says just a few months later, and this week I put in my notice. I really appreciate the support on this post, but family law is tough, and I have a ton of respect for the decent attorneys who are able to stick with it. This is an attorney. This is a former family law attorney expressing his frustration with the family law. Folks, the family law system in the United States of America is broken. It is based on outdated concepts. It is so arbitrary. It is so riddled with bias, the biases of these judges, the biases of the people involved in the court process, the mediators, the judges, the attorneys. It's ridiculous. Where's the reform? There doesn't seem to be any reform. Where's the reform? Guys, on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the broken family law system. We're going to talk about child custody, divorce. We're going to talk about child support, etc., etc. The broken family court system in the United States of America is the topic on Move Forward with Matt Campisi. So what's wrong with the family court system in the United States of America? Well, for starters, the family law, the family court, tends to have the least competent judges and attorneys. A lot of times it's a starting ground for new judges, new attorneys. The judges, the attorneys are the least competent. there is a serious lack of adequate training in domestic violence, family counseling concepts. It leads to misunderstandings, which lead to harmful decisions that are made by these judges. The bias in the family court system is like I've never seen before in my life. The bias is rampant. Gender bias is the norm. It's acceptable. It's a way of life in the family court system. Nobody feels that there's anything wrong with this. Or the ones who do, their complaints fall on deaf ears. Where's the change? Politicians, where's the legislation? Where's the change in our family court system when you have rampant incompetence, when you have rampant bias? What about the arbitrary nature of these decisions that are made by judges? There's no rhyme or reason. It just seems to be at the whim of this unqualified, and many times unqualified, judges based on their biases. Limited grounds for appeal. Of course not. Of course there's limited grounds for appeal in the family court system, because every case is it's insane. It's insane. Lack of transparency, sealed records, private hearings done behind closed doors. Why such a lack of transparency in the family court system? Child support. Don't get me started on child support. These exorbitant awards. Gender bias. Gender bias is the norm. It's baked into the system in family court, in child support orders. The processing fee racket. How many billions of dollars every year are collected in fees, these added fees to process child support? This is a money-making racket, child support. What about the lack of accountability for how this child support money is spent? The moms going out and getting their hair done, getting their nails done, buying liquor, going to the club, going to the bar. And that's where the child support money is going. Why wouldn't they do that? If there's no accountability, if there's a 100% lack of accountability, what do you expect? Where's the reform? Where is the family court reform? That's the question I have to the voters, to every single person listening to this who votes. Demand reform from your elected representatives. To the representatives, we demand reform. Where's the legislation reforming the broken family court system? It's long overdue. It's long overdue. I have a special guest I'm going to be talking to. He is a person who is very much in favor of dad's rights, father's rights in family courts. He's going to talk about his point of view, why he does what he does, which is to stand up for the rights of dads, because there is so much gender bias in the family court system. It's outdated. It's concepts from the 1930s being applied in 2025 and beyond. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, folks. Reform, it's needed. We're going to talk with our special guest, see what he has to say about this issue. There's many dads who understand my frustration. They understand the anger when it comes to the family court system, because they've been through it. If you haven't been through it, count your lucky stars. And if nothing else, use this podcast as a warning, as a reminder to do everything you possibly can to stay out of that family court system, because that family court system, divorce, child support, anything to do with family law, you know you're in trouble if you're a male. You are in big trouble, and nobody cares. The politicians don't care. The judges don't care. The attorneys, they care, and the reason they care is because of how much money that they're raking in from these cases. Family law, it needs to be reformed. We're going to talk with our special guest now, who's going to talk to us about fathers' rights in the family court system. Okay, everyone, I'm here with James Christianson. James Christianson has a website, and he is a longtime advocate for fathers' rights. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I wanted to ask you, what got you started talking about fathers' rights? How did you get into this?
Well, like just about any guy who's ever dealt with family court, I got blindsided by the system. I totally got blindsided by the system and dragged into family court, first with an attempt at a restraining order, then I had to fight for my rights to just be involved in my daughter's life. And when I finally found somebody to help me out, it was a guy with this group called Dads Against Discrimination. And so when I got custody of my daughter when she was 7 months old, after I was done with that, I worked with dads and things that they were trying to do. I volunteered to answer their calls, and it's kind of funny. It turned out that when I would take calls for Dads Against Discrimination and tell them about dads' meetings and what they were doing, I ended up giving them information about my own case and how I won. And then people wanted to follow up with me and stuff like that, kind of outside the capacity of that. And I also volunteered with another non-custodial parents group called The Other Parent. Both of those are now defunct pretty much. And then I started realizing it kind of organically grew into like, I need to have my own thing to help dads out. And so that's where I kind of started. And I was doing it as a side thing while I was working full time. And then eventually it came to a point I was getting so many clientele and people I had to deal with that I just did it full time. So since about 2008, I've been helping dads and moms, because it's all about the kids and sometimes moms get screwed. But that's kind of the general short of it of how I really got into it. I got dragged into the system. Then I wanted to help here and there. And then it turned out people wanted to hear more and more from me. So I eventually it evolved into me doing my own thing and having fathers' rights and resources. Yeah.
And how did you do it, man? How did you get full custody of your daughter? It seems to be a hard thing for guys to get full custody. What's your secret?
Well, it is hard, and the secret actually is not so secret because what I did was what the women usually do. What I did was I got on the offensive and I went to war, and I wore the mother down until she surrendered. Most of the time it's the other way around. And 95% of court cases settle out of court. So the person who usually settles or gives up the most stuff or surrenders the most is the one who's getting beat down the most. And usually that's the dad. And I didn't even really know what I was doing. I talk in my videos a lot about I was a warehouse worker who flunked out of college. Then I was dragged into a restraining order court. Then I was forced to go to family court. But all I knew was that I was going to fight for my daughter. And all I knew is that anybody who got in my way of me seeing my daughter, whether it was the mother doing a restraining order, whether it was a witness that came to court for her, those people were all my enemy because all I cared about and all I could care about was my life with my kid. And so, me and the mom actually had a good plan. And then as soon as she started as soon as she started the restraining order thing, that was a total Judas-like betrayal and the opposite of everything we talked about. And she lied in court. There's one time she turned around and looked at me in court before the judge came out and smirked at me and look at all the witnesses out of my side, including a lady that I dated that she wanted to kill and hated at one time. And so I had to desperately fight like somebody who is being jumped in the street and you just swing and hopefully you hit something and you got, cold cocked or sucker punched. Or, a country that just got bombed, you just go to war and pick up a weapon and fight. You don't sit around and ask questions and wait for the other side to surrender. It's kill or be killed. So I had that mentality from the beginning. Even though I was a nice guy with my baby's mom, I co-parent, I kissed her butt while she was pregnant because, the woman, emotional hormones and stuff like that. But when she tried to take my kid away, then it was time to go to war. And I was advised by people to calm down, play it cool. My own sister had a couple of boyfriends who went through family court, and they're both businessmen, and each of them spent $100,000, and they got nothing out of the deal. And she said, look, just give your baby's mom whatever she wants. Just don't give yourself an ulcer or have a stroke fighting it. You're going to get screwed. And I was like, I can't do that. If I'm going to get screwed, I'm going to go down swinging. And there's a great meme or cartoon out there about never giving up. And it's a frog that's being swallowed by a pelican. And you see the frog. Have you ever seen that one? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I love that. It's the one where he's
Yeah.
choking the
So
neck.
the pelican has his mouth open and the frog's head is in there, but his hands are out and he's choking the pelican's throat. So the pelican can't swallow it. So the pelican's got to spit him out. And so it's like, if you're going to go down swinging. And so that was my mentality. And that's really the answer to your question. The secret is going to war and engaging in the war of attrition and clapping back, slapping back, fighting fire with fire. And by the time everybody wants to go to mediation or go to trial, somebody's going to give up, or else, you're one of those 5% of cases you do go to war and do go to trial. I just got done talking and consulting with the guy who went to trial, but his attorney, the day before, his attorney wanted to settle at mediation. He didn't want to take the deal. And so he had a good mentality. Then they went to trial. The day before trial, she's like, we should offer them this and that, which shows the attorney didn't even want to go to trial. Everybody's too scared to go to trial, or the attorneys don't want to work hard, and they'd rather earn their money easily by just talking and yakking and going to mediation. But he said his attorney didn't even call any witnesses on his behalf. The mother had witnesses. And when some witnesses got on the stand, the attorney didn't even cross-examine them. And so he's got a screwy deal, but he didn't even attempt to engage in the warfare of trial when it came to going to trial. And that's the problem guys have. So I stopped counting at 300 the number of dads I worked with over the years who got full custody, and with most of them without an attorney. A few of them had an attorney, but I've never met an attorney who's helped more than 10 dads get full custody. And these guys, it would be a whole lot more guys because I've dealt with 25,000 cases, but these are guys who engaged in the war of attrition, got on the offensive. The mother violated a court order. He jumped on contempt. She did discovery. He did discovery. He used all the tools and weapons that were available to him. And about a dozen guys got one by default because they caught the mother off guard. And then a couple of them were abandoning mothers. I've had guys who won by default and they only proposed like 50-50 every other weekend. So that's what they got. They should have proposed full custody. But I had the mentality, I'm going to war over my kid because my kid was my life. As soon as she was born, just like any dad, especially with a daughter, you fall in love with your child and your whole world changes and your whole world immediately revolves around that child. And then it was stripped away from me. And that trauma is the trauma that dads usually suffer, and they get paralyzed by that shock and trauma. I took it as an act of war, and I had to go to war like any soldier would. And that mentality went as far as I told myself when I was going to court and I didn't get anything for like 2.5 months. If I keep getting nothing, I'm going to court until my daughter's 18 so that I could face her one day and say, if she complains that I wasn't around, I'll say, look at this paperwork that goes up to the moon. I fought for you. And so that's the mentality I had regardless of what happened. And then after I fought off restraining orders, attempts, I lost in court when I was trying to get visitation. I appealed the decision. I got 5 days a week. Then I got the mother found in contempt. Then the mother did discovery. So I turned around and took her paperwork and wrote the questionnaire, this word for word, and sent it off to her, and did a couple other things until she surrendered. And then she wanted me to have custody and even if I would not have won those hearings, I'm convinced just the process of beating her down and getting on the offensive wore her down. And then we went to court a year later and she tried to modify, and I could have surrendered and settled with her, but I was like, I'm not going to surrender on some bullcrap deal that you're offering. So we were in court for a year and a half, and then she dropped her modification case. I saw the war of attrition over and over with her, and I've seen it in countless cases, but I had my mind made up to go to war, and I was willing to go the whole marathon. And then it turns out I was actually in shock. I fell to my knees and thank God, and almost fainted when they offered to settle, because I couldn't believe it was out of the blue. And I didn't even know I was wearing her down. But now after seeing 25,000 cases, I know that that's the way for a dad to get the best chance to get something fair, whether it's 50-50, go from 0 to every other weekend, or even get custody. You got to have a warrior's mentality and go to war. That was my secret. But on top of that, I learned all the skills and the laws and stuff like that. But it was mainly my attitude going in. So that's what helped me win, really. If you think about when somebody cops a plea to a criminal case, like let's say you're trespassing on somebody's lawn and you damage their flowers or something, they might say, okay, we're going to charge you malicious mischief, damage of property, terroristic threat, and a bunch of hyped up bullcrap, because they want you to cop a plea of this one thing. So they'll press 10 charges and scare the crap out of you. So you'll say, well, we'll put you on probation for 6 months and do community service and this will go away. You go, oh, that's a great deal. I don't want to risk going to prison for 2 years. That's the war of attrition that prosecutors do in criminal court. And so usually in family court, if a dad gets on the offensive, the mother's like, what will it take for you to just work this out and settle with me? And now you got all the leverage to talk and negotiate. So that's really the main number one secret. And then you want to learn the laws and everything on top of that. That's a secondary thing, but it's almost as important.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that with the listeners. I had my ex-wife filed a protective order against me at one time, and it was completely bogus. And it ended up getting thrown out, tossed out of court. But I was blown away that somebody can do that. Somebody could just make up lies, and the judge is just gonna fall for it. It was traumatizing for me.
Did she get an emergency order? Then it was dismissed at the next hearing, or was it?
Correct.
Did it last a while?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was in effect for there was a month or so that it was in effect, and it traumatized me that she could just go and make all these accusations. But I believe that she did that because we have kids together, and she was very, very concerned that I was going to get custody of the kids.
She was worried that you would get custody?
Yes.
Yeah. And women, that's one of the main reasons women lie about domestic violence or child abuse or molestation in order to get leverage. And it's well established, and it's written about. I have a whole packet where I deal with defending against restraining orders. And in there, I quote like 30 different sources of lawyers, judges, Harvard law professors, articles by bar associations about the epidemic of women lying about restraining orders and how it's used as a silver bullet or the weapon of choice. And it's used and it's lied about more often than the truth is told. Just think about it. A woman's really, really abused by a guy, and she's worried he's going to kill her if she goes to court and fights. Most of those women don't even go to court. And I've had women that I've worked with, I've had to try and convince them to go to court and deal with a guy who was actually abusive. But the average man, like 99.9% of men, think that you're a punk if you ever hit a woman, and we'd never touch a woman. I can't even fathom to count the number of guys who've been accused of beating the snot out of their baby's mom, and they've never touched a woman. They swear up and down they never touched a woman, because the average man doesn't do that. You fight somebody, you pick on somebody your own size, and but that's the weapon of choice. And a lot of guys don't know. Did you get an attorney right away, or did you do it yourself?
I did. Went out and got an attorney right away. I had to find the money for it. It was very expensive. He wanted a pretty high retainer. I did what I had to do.
And so what you weren't told is that in between that month, did she go to court and get an emergency order without telling you, and you didn't know until you got served the paperwork?
Correct.
Yeah. So a lot of guys don't realize this, but in the rules on injunctions, an emergency motion is a type of injunction. The court can do injunctions like the court enters an injunction, the media can't be part of this trial, and the media is excluded. Or some business real estate developer wants to buy a building that's about to be torn down. They can go get an injunction to stop the demolition so they can put in a bid and negotiate stuff. An emergency restraining order or ex parte restraining order is a type of injunction. And the rules on injunctions, if you type in your state, most states it's Civil Rule 65, but some states, I shouldn't even guess at the number, but I think it was in the 560s. I was talking to somebody in Texas about that. But there's always a rule on injunctions, and it says that, nobody can get an injunction unless they give notice to the other side. And if she didn't give you notice, she violated that. Unless there's one exception. If they prove that giving you notice is going to cause irreparable harm, or there's going to be irreparable harm or permanent harm, if she can't be heard right now before she even tells you. And usually the women will say, oh, he's going to kill me. If I tell him I'm coming down here, he's going to kill me. Or one legitimate reason to get a restraining order, an emergency order without telling the other side and without giving notice is this person's going to take flight with the child. If I tell them I'm going to court, they'll take off before I even get to court. I'll never see the kid again. So I need emergency relief now. And then at the return hearing or that show cause hearing, they'll have a chance to defend themselves. So, but in between that window, the reason I brought up the civil rule on injunctions, if your listeners go out and just Google that rule, if you're in Massachusetts, Google Massachusetts civil rules injunctions. In most states, it's going to be civil rule 65. That's the federal rule. You're not in federal court, so don't get it mixed up with the federal rule. But in there it says the person who's being restrained may file to have the emergency restraint. Like you did the emergency restraint order, then you went to the full hearing. That first emergency order, somewhere in between that time, as long as you give usually it's 2 days notice, as long as you give the side 2 days notice, you can go back to that courtroom and get it quashed, dissolved, or modified. Most people don't know that, and most attorneys don't even tell their client about that. They just get ready for this hearing coming down here. And you said you had a month that went by, you didn't see your kids or whatever happened. You could go to court and do a motion to quash or dissolve or modify that order. Even go in there and say, hey, look, I just had the kids for a week in the summer, and now she's saying I'm dangerous to the kids. That's bullcrap. If you don't totally terminate this thing, at least take the kids off of it so I can see the kids. I'll meet her at a police station, or she can send somebody. I don't care less whether I talk to her ever again. And when I found out in my restraining order proceeding, if a guy distances himself from the mother and saying, the only reason I even talk to her is because I want to see my kids and she has control of my access to the kids. If it wasn't for the kids, I wouldn't even be talking to her. And I had 2 restraining order hearings, and I was like, wait a minute, Your Honor. It looks like they're saying that I'm calling the house, my baby's mom and her roommates and witnesses. They're acting like I'm calling the house to talk to her. I could care less whether I talk to her ever again. I just want to be an involved father. And the judge woke up and said, this guy doesn't even care about her. There's no basis for a restraining order. So when guys distance themselves and they get on the offensive and call a spade, a lot of times they do well with restraining orders. Some guys will go in there, they'll just sign off on it and agree. Okay, fine, I care less whether I talk to her. I'll agree to the restraining order. Now let's move to the custody hearing. Well, now you're screwed because now you just agreed that you're a domestic violence perpetrating anger management monster, And women, part of one of my arguments, and I've worked with plenty of guys fighting off restraining orders. And like I said, I have a packet in my store where I lay out some of these arguments. Some of the extreme examples include, there's a woman in Oklahoma who, fortunately they caught her, but she downloaded child porn on her husband's phone to frame him in court in order to get custody. And that's what the article says, that she did it to set up getting custody. But she committed a federal crime by downloading child porn because she did it.
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing that the sheriffs caught it because they're like, there's 200 images downloaded in the same day. Usually these people, they'll download a few images here, a few images there, and it takes a few weeks before they have a big old album of that stuff. And so they arrested her, and she's in prison right now and he would have been framed. It's like 5 years for every single picture, and she copped a plea to like 7 years or something. And there's another lady in New Mexico. She got one of those emergency ex parte restraining orders in emergency court against David Letterman, the talk show host, because she said that he was harassing her through the television and wanted to get with her and stuff. But that shows that in the emergency court, they don't even pay attention. They just sign off on that stuff just in case it happened, and you'll have your full chance later on. And then David Letterman sent his goons and his attorneys down there to fix it. But those are some of the crazy examples. And if women are willing to go to that extreme, then there's something wrong with the system, or there's something wrong with people who have the audacity to do that stuff, So I use examples like that to show how stupid, when I'm working with a client, to help them show how stupid that the allegations are and how it's constantly abused. Because if you go in there and say, women lie about this stuff all the time, well, that's just you talking. But if you go in there and you quote attorneys and bar associations and documentaries and Harvard law professors, you say, look, this is another sad case of a woman abusing the system when there's real victims out here not even coming to court. I see guys win all the time if they acknowledge they're not just attacking their baby's mom and looking like they're attacking women. Like, we want to protect the real women victims, but this one she's making a mockery of those ones by coming in here and using domestic violence as a punchline or whatever, So that's crazy. But the crazy thing about that, and I didn't know about a motion to quash either. I had to wait until the hearing, or else I would have jumped all over it. I found out about that later on. But even with the protection order, I think every guy should do a motion to quash, jump on it. And even if you don't win, it's a practice run. And especially if you're representing yourself, you get a practice shot at it before the full hearing to determine whether you get one. And then most states have the option to petition to modify or vacate or wipe out a protection order also. So, so yeah, that's a long answer to your point on that.
James, thank you so much, man. Knowledge truly is power. And I really appreciate you sticking up for dads out there.
Yes, sir.
Where can our listeners get more information about you and the work that you do to try to help dads? Do you have a website or something?
One of the easiest ways to find me is just use the hashtag #HowIGotCustody. It's kind of my moniker, my slogan. I'm up here telling people how I got custody. But I have what's like most people are familiar with the term link tree, where you got all your links in one spot. I have a flow page. It's the same thing as a link tree, just a different company. But if you type in flow page, father's rights, if you type in those 4 words, you'll go to my flow page. And on that flow page, I have contact information, my social media, my store. I have a section that has certain types of free documents and samples of things like how I keep a diary for court. Then I have, those are free documents. Then I have a section about free information and links to free stuff, like how alienation, psychologists are now saying how alienation is just as bad as molestation or child abuse, even though it's not a physical thing. That psychological torture is just as bad. And scientific data and studies about absent fathers. And then I have links to different states for resources about case law and the law in your state. I don't have every single state, but some of the more popular ones, because I deal with people all over the country, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. And I even have links to like Ireland, the United Kingdom. I think I have England and the Netherlands and Canada. And so if you go there, there's a bunch of free information. I'll also show you some of my winning orders, because I don't expect people to believe me just because I sound good or I spit some knowledge about the laws or whatever. You shouldn't trust anybody in the family court system, just like you shouldn't trust anybody in the business world. Like, you trust but verify, or you make sure that they're good on their word by agreeing to a contract or having a written agreement or a handshake agreement. You don't just blindly trust people. Nobody should trust what I'm saying. Like what I'm talking about when I was talking about injunctions, I tell you like where to go look it up yourself. I'm not telling you this is James's rules for doing this. This is the rules out there, and you can go find them yourself. So I post my winning orders of some of my biggest wins. My custody order, the first time the mother was committing contempt, I got her found in contempt the first time I tried. Again, I was representing myself. The mother had an attorney with 17 years experience. And there was a guardian ad litem on board who hated my guts. And I made them all look stupid at the contempt hearing. And I was a warehouse worker who flunked out of college. So I've proven, if I could do it, anybody could do it. Like, everybody who has an excuse why they can't go to court and represent themselves or light a fire under their attorney, they don't have an excuse. They just don't want to do it. They're scared. They're intimidated. Or they have an excuse not to do it, just like somebody has an excuse not to go to medical school or not to go on a diet or not to improve themselves, You can do anything you really want to do if you put your mind to it in most areas of life, and this is another one of those areas. So I show people my contempt order, my custody order. I won in the Court of Appeals twice, which is hard to do. A lot of attorneys don't even go to the Court of Appeals, and I destroyed the mother's second attorney. Had 37 years experience when he came on board, and we were in and out of court until he retired after 50 years, and I beat him in the Court of Appeals twice. And just one win against a seasoned attorney proves that I know what I'm talking about. And I got several of them. And there's a period of time when we went back to court and the mother was trying to modify. I did get an attorney because I was scared to go to trial. But that attorney let me write all the paperwork and instruct him and tell him what to say. So I was really doing everything, and he was just my mouthpiece. And then that's when I really realized, like the third year into my battle, my daughter was 3, I really realized, man, we could even do our own trials. And I've had countless people do their own trials. Half a day, 1 day, 2 days. Probably longest trial I dealt with was 4 or 5 days. And guys going in there and some women going in there and just killing it against attorneys. So, but to find me, if you Google flow page, father's rights, that's where you go, or use the hashtag #HowIGotCustody. If you find any of my videos or social media, I tell you how to get to that link. Like under every YouTube video, I have that link. So if you find me somewhere, you'll find all my stuff in the Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. So.
James, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom. And dads, don't give up out there.
Yes, sir.